Okay, so get this. Our deep dive today, it's going right into the thick of Cold War paranoia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're talking CIA, mind control, and the mysteries surrounding Frank Olson's death.
Wow.
Did he decide to end his own life? Or did his super secret work for the agency, make him a liability?
You send over newspaper articles, historical accounts, the whole shebang, and honestly, the stuff, it's like ripped right out of a spy movie.
It's interesting because most people, when they think CIA, they think espionage, right? But Olson's case, it sort of cracks the door open on this whole other thing.
What's that?
Their fascination, deep fascination with biological and chemical weapons.
Oh, wow.
And you got to remember, this is a world already kind of freaking out about nuclear war.
Right, right. Like everyone's looking at the bombs, but what about the diseases we could weaponize?
Exactly.
The silent threats, invisible threats.
It wasn't just theoretical either. The CIA, particularly their chemical division, they were actually developing and testing these agents. We're talking anthrax, plague, even brucellosis.
Diseases that could decimate populations.
Okay, now that's seriously scary stuff.
It gets even wilder. They had this Operation Large Area Coverage, where they actually released bacteria into the New York City subway system.
No way. Are you serious? They did that here in New York.
Yeah, it's pretty unsettling when you think about it.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show how far they were willing to go in this pursuit. And you need to understand all of this backdrop of covert ops and bioweapons, to really get Frank Olson's story.
Okay, so fill me in. Who was this guy?
He was a researcher, right?
Yeah.
Something to do with bioweapons.
You got it. He worked at Fort Detrick, a U.S. Army facility, but he was also secretly on the CIA's payroll.
They're kidding.
And this was back when the line between scientific research and, straight-up espionage was really blurry. Olson was an expert in aerosol delivery systems, which is crucial if you want to disperse biological weapons.
He was in deep, and then he just dies. Yeah, so Thanksgiving weekend, 1953, Olson supposedly jumps from a hotel window right here in New York City, ruled a suicide. Case closed.
Just like that, huh?
Yeah.
A bioweapons expert knows all the top secret stuff, and he just, decides to end it all? Nobody thinks that's a little too convenient.
Right, and it gets weirder. Turns out 2 CIA agents were with Olson in the days leading up to his death.
Oh, boy.
One of them was even in the hotel room with him when he,
What are the odds? Who is this agent? Just some random CIA guy?
Not random at all. It was Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the head of the CIA's chemical division.
Wait a minute. So the guy in charge of the CIA's bioweapons program is hanging out with Olson right before he dies? That just screams suspicious. And what's even more messed up is they found out the CIA had secretly dosed Olson with LSD.
Oh, yeah.
Just days before his death.
That's important. The CIA at the time, they were obsessed with mind control. They even had this program, M-Culture.
And culture? Okay, now that rings a bell. Didn't they, experiment on people?
He did.
Oh, man.
A lot. And we'll dig into all the messed up details of M-Culture right after this. M-Culture. Sounds like, I don't know, some kind of, Cold War thriller,
Yeah.
But this was the real deal.
Wow.
So picture this. The CIA, right? They're paranoid, obviously. They want to get one up in this whole global power struggle thing. And they decide, hey, let's figure out how to control people's minds.
Okay, now that is both fascinating and terrifying. But how do you even begin to control another person's mind?
That's the crazy part. It wasn't just one experiment. It went on for over a decade.
Get out.
Dozens of different projects, all under this M-Culture umbrella. They were using LSD, hypnosis, electroshock therapy, often on people who had no clue they were even part of some experiment.
So basically they were using human beings as guinea pigs to try and crack the code on mind control.
Basically. It's really a dark period for the CIA. No way around it.
No kidding.
What's even worse, so much of what they did was just plain wrong ethically, and often really brutal. It makes you think, what were they even hoping to accomplish with all this?
Right. What was the end game?
Well, they wanted to find ways to literally control what people thought and did. Imagine if you could program an assassin.
Oh, wow.
Or make an enemy agent just spill their guts without even realizing it.
That's wild. It's like something you'd read in a spy novel.
Except this was actually happening.
So where does Frank Olson fit in with all of this?
We know he was involved in these M-Culture programs, although, to be honest, no one's 100% sure exactly how.
Okay.
But the timing of his death, just a few days after that LSD dose.
Right.
It's hard not to be suspicious.
You mentioned earlier that he might have been having second thoughts about the work he was doing, right? Could they have killed him to shut him up.
Some people who've really studied this case, they think it's definitely a possibility.
Wow.
They argue that Olson might have stumbled onto some information, maybe something really dark about MKUltra, and that made him, well, a liability.
And the CIA agents who were with him right before he died, any idea what they were up to?
The CIA always said they were just trying to help Olson through what they called, quote unquote, a mental breakdown.
Right, right.
But a lot of folks, they believe those agents were actually keeping tabs on him, maybe even trying to control him.
Okay, so let's just say for a second that Olson was becoming a problem for the CIA.
Okay.
He knew too much. They were afraid he might talk. Why not just discredit him? Declare him mentally unstable, which sadly wouldn't have been that much of a stretch back then. Why go to such extremes?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And it's why people are still talking about this case even today. Some people, they think Olson's death, it was meant to be a message.
A message? Like what?
Like a warning to anyone else who might even think about going against the CIA.
That's dark, man.
It is. And it's important to remember, the CIA back then, total secrecy.
Yeah.
Hardly any oversight. They basically did whatever they wanted.
And this experiment on British soldiers at Porton Down, you touched on that before, sounds like another piece of this crazy puzzle. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, yeah. Porton Down. That was another example of just how far MKUltra reached and how the CIA, they were willing to team up with other intelligence agencies on these super top secret projects. In the early 50s, they were working with British intelligence, testing out sarin gas.
Sarin gas, like the attack in Tokyo.
Exactly. Lethal nerve agents.
That's scary stuff.
And get this, they were testing it on young soldiers, told them it was for a common cold study.
You're kidding me. These guys had no idea.
Nope. And tragically, one of the soldiers, Ronald Madison, he died within minutes of being exposed.
Oh, jeez. That's awful. What happened afterwards? Did anyone face consequences?
Like a lot of these covert operations, the truth about Porton Downs stayed buried for years, decades actually, before the whole thing came out. And even then, so many unanswered questions.
Do we know for sure if Frank Olson was involved in the Porton Down experiments?
There's no smoking gun, nothing that says he was directly involved. But there are hints that he at least knew about it.
Okay.
And some folks who research this stuff, they think that maybe, just maybe, knowing about those messed up experiments, that could have been part of why he was starting to feel so uneasy about everything the CIA was doing.
It's like this whole tangled web. Every time you think you're getting somewhere, you just end up with more questions.
Yeah.
So did the truth about Olson and MKUltra ever actually come out? Well, I mean, the truth usually finds a way, doesn't it?
It does, eventually. Even if it takes, like, decades. And for the CIA and all their dark secrets, things really started coming out in the 70s.
The church committee hearings, right?
Go.
They were the ones looking into all kinds of crazy stuff supposedly going on with U.S. intelligence.
Right, and those hearings, along with some really, tenacious reporters, they forced the CIA's hand. They had to admit to at least some of what they'd been up to.
MKUltra included.
Yeah, including MKUltra.
But even then, I mean, they weren't exactly, giving up all the details, were they? Didn't they destroy a bunch of MKUltra records?
They did. Claimed it was for national security, of course.
Right, right.
But a lot of people saw that as, well, trying to cover their tracks a little too late.
I bet. Can you imagine what would happen if something like MKUltra came out today?
Oh, man.
The government experimenting on their own people, trying to get inside their heads, it'd be absolute chaos.
Yeah.
And through it all, you've got Frank Olson's family just wanting answers. Did they ever get any closure?
They fought tooth and nail, I'll tell you that. They really pushed the government, demanded the truth, and it paid off in a way. They eventually got a settlement. But no one ever actually faced any consequences for Olson's death.
That's tough.
It's a pretty stark reminder of just how high the stakes were and how these shadowy operations, they really impacted real people's lives.
Mm-hmm. It really makes you think twice about, everything you thought you knew. It feels like we're just scratching the surface of this whole Cold War period.
That's the thing about this whole deep dive, right? Frank Olson, MKUltra, these CIA secrets. It makes you confront some really uncomfortable stuff about power, about the things people in charge will do when they think no one's watching. And those questions, they're still relevant today.
For sure. So for you, what's the biggest takeaway from all of this? What do you hope our listeners really understand after listening to this?
I'd say the biggest thing is, don't just accept what you're told. especially when it comes to people in power, governments, those kinds of things.
Right.
Dig a little deeper, ask questions, and don't be afraid to demand some transparency. The more we know about what happened in the past, the better we can navigate the present, and who knows, maybe even avoid making the same mistakes in the future.
Well said. This has been one of those deep dives that really sticks with you, you know? I know I'm going to be thinking about Frank Olson and this whole thing for a while. And for everyone listening, don't stop here. The stuff you shared, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole world of information out there waiting to be uncovered. So keep digging, keep asking those tough questions, and most importantly, stay curious. Until next time.